Morning.
I see you, Chairperson. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
It's been a while. I missed you guys. Bye.
Yes, we have missed each other. So, dealing with the issue of committee business, in terms of Rule 1582, the chairperson of the committee, subject to other provisions of these rules and directions of the committee, may act in any matter on behalf of and in the best interest of the committee when it is not practical to arrange a meeting of the committee to discuss a matter. Also, the chairperson must report to the committee any steps taken in terms of sub-rule 2B. In light of the above, I wish to inform the committee of changes to the program submitted for approval, in that the following engagements have been postponed to the fourth quarter. The engagement with the DTIC and stakeholders on the implementation of the South African Poultry Sector Master Plan, scheduled for the 23rd of August 22. The Minister requested that the postponement due to ongoing negotiations among stakeholders within the sector. He further requested that the engagement with the downstream sugar industries on possibilities and challenges to sugar beneficiation pertaining to biofuels scheduled on the 31st of August be postponed to afford the Minister an opportunity to engage with its counterpart, the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy, where the matter of biofuels resides. Thirdly, the tabling of the annual report of the DTIC would most likely be on the 30th of September 2022. Hence, it has been postponed to the fourth quarter. Other changes relate to changes in dates only. Furthermore, I also received communication from the Minister in which he has requested to consult the committee regarding the appointment of the Commissioner of the BBBE Commission as required by legislation, and that is on the program. Then the briefing by the DTIC on the draft policy on scrap metal. The Portfolio Committee of Trade and Industry has consistently raised concern over the impact of the export of ferrous and non-ferrous scrap metals on the economy in terms of the availability of scrap metal for manufacturing of steel products and on the prevalence of theft of critical infrastructure. In this regard, the committee had requested the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, in consultation with his counterparts, to consider alternative policy measures to mitigate this impact. This was considered critical as the export control of scrap metal had not resulted in a significant decline in the export of such illegally acquired scrap metal. Consequently, the DTIC had committed to revert to the committee once alternative policy measures had been investigated and were being proposed. As a result, the Minister will today be briefing the committee on the draft policy proposals and measures to restrict and regulate trade in ferrous and non-ferrous metals waste, scrap and semi-finished ferrous and non-ferrous metal products to limit damage to infrastructure and the economy, as gazetted for public comment on the 5th of August 2022. The purpose of this meeting is to afford the committee an opportunity to engage with the Minister on the draft proposals. So with that introduction, can I then hand over to the Minister and his team? Minister?
Chair, if I may, Chair, before we proceed, Chair?
Yes, Mr. Mint.
Chair, may I advise that before all the changes to the program, and we at the last meetings we didn't formally adopt our program, that we adopt our program that you just indicated changes to, that we formally as a committee do so, Chair. If we have the opportunity now to do so, Chair, if you wish to do so.
Okay, thank you. Can I just hear Honorable Mbiani first?
Chairperson, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. I wanted to raise what has just been raised by Andre, and I proposed that we adopt the amendment program as a PC program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we ask the committee secretariat with that proposal to flight? I see Sheldon is flighting the program. And I think just for process, if you can just briefly go through the program, Secretary. Mr. Hermans.
Chair, the program as we have it before us, you have indicated the changes. The first one was for today on the 23rd, where we were having the draft policy on scrap metal by the Minister. Then 24th, do you want me to go through all the items, Chair, quickly, or do we just...
Yes, please, yes, okay. It won't take long, just
no
do
problem.
it, yes.
24th, we are formally considering the fourth quarter financial and non-financial report of the DTIC, and we'll probably add some minutes to that as well. Then on the 30th, as requested by the Minister, and you briefed us already, the Minister will brief the committee on the appointment of the Commissioner for the BBBE Commission, and we'll also get a briefing from the DTIC on the implementation of the relief programs, including the 2021 unrest and the recent floods, and its impact on the broad economy and DTIC's allocated budget. Then we will have engagement with the downstream sugar industry and possibilities, challenges to sugar beneficiation from the food and beverage sector. On the 6th, we will get a briefing by the DTIC on its initiatives to reduce red tape, as well as update on the rollout of provincial one-stop shops. On the 7th, we'll get a briefing by the IDC, NEF, and DTIC on its funding application and adjudication processes, as well on its aftercare services. Then on the 13th, Chair, we will get a briefing by the DTIC on the status of implementation of the following legislation: Intellectual Property Laws Amendment Act, the National Credit Amendment Act, the Comatology Act, Protection of Investment Act, and we also get a briefing by the DTIC on the status of the reviewing process with regard to the following: the Consumer Protection Act and the National Gambling Act. Then on the 20th, Chair, we will have an engagement with the DTIC and stakeholders on the implementation of the master plan for the South African furniture industry. Then on the 21st, we'll engage the Limpopo Economic Development and Tourism Department on development and plans for the Messina Mercado SEZ. And we'll also get a briefing from the Limpopo Development Agency on the development and plans for the Sheshego and Kowankongwa industrial parks. On the 27th, Chair, we'll have a follow-up briefing with the SIU on the investigation and allegations of maladministration and corruption at the National Office Commissions. We'll also use the opportunity to afford the Minister to introduce the NLC chairperson and the board, and also get a response from DTIC and the NLC on the SIU findings. Then on the 28th, we will have a workshop on industrial policy focusing on localization and beneficiation. Consider our program and minutes, Chair. That's the amended program for consideration, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mbiani, I see your hand is still up. You have proposed adoption of the program as tabled.
Yes, I did, Chairperson. Thank you.
Dr. Twaku, Chair, has raised his hand.
Dr. Twaku.
No, thank you very much. I request that Chair, thing is not to show my video. I'm in a very bad area in terms of the network, so I just want to say the bandwidth. Apology for that. Okay. I wanted to check my Chair. Is when do these the entities come maybe to the other entities? When do we come and they do their presentation on us? Do they come as and when there's a crisis, or I'm just checking because on the other areas you'll find that in the Home Affairs you'll have the GPE that the government printing will come present maybe their report, or IEC will come through. But in us on this side, do we sometimes get the IDC or coming to present on the stuff that they've done, or the National Lottery and all of that? But when do these entities come to our committee, maybe for presentations of their and things, and maybe their programs of action and what they are doing? Thank you. I know there are a lot of them. We might not get through all of them, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Dr. Twaku. The committee so far, I think, has seen all the 17 entities, if I'm not mistaken. But I think if there is a particular entity that you would request for with good reason, of course, for us to request, you can make a submission and we will consider it. The PC Mancom will consider it. But the entities regularly report to the portfolio committee.
Okay. No, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
And with that, you will second the adoption of the program, the PC program, Dr. Twaku? Can we call for the seconder for the adoption of the program tabled?
Mr. Burns,
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll second the move of the adoption of the program.
Thank you very much. You want to third, Honorable Burns Namashe?
Chair, at least I had thought that Dr. Twaku will second the adoption of the agenda, of the program, rather.
I got disrupted, man. Sorry, I got disrupted. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. I thought so. He did say he has network challenges. So our program is duly adopted for this term. We now hand over to the Minister for the briefing on the draft policy on scrap metals. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning to you, to the honourable members who are present today, to the staff of Parliament, as well as to the members of the department and the members of the media who are present. Chairperson, may I advise that we have present also Deputy Minister Majola, as well as the Acting Director General Shabir Khan, and Deputy Directors Generals Stephen Hanneville and Nimrod Zalk. I also have a number of staff members with specific responsibilities, Tandi Pele and Mahendra Shunmugan, who are both working on matters relating to the metal industry. Chairperson, I'd like to start by appreciating the opportunity that the committee has given us, particularly that the committee was able to adjust the program and to put this item on the agenda today, because it's in the period during which we in the executive are applying our mind on appropriate measures, and it would be helpful, therefore, to also hear the comments of members of Parliament before the measures that we will be talking about today are finalized. I'd like to start, Chairperson, by asking Tsulumushi to briefly run a video. I want to apologize that I know that there will be honorable members whose bandwidth are limited and they may have some difficulty in following this, but as soon as the video is over, we'll go to a more bandwidth-friendly presentation.
I think we must just start the sound on the video, or it seems frozen.
This is what some of our viewers are finding. To find out what the word on the street is regarding our question of the week, this is what some of our viewers are to say.
does cable theft affect you in this specific area? We've been out without power since Sunday around about 2 o'clock in the morning. Yesterday, for myself, I had to go to a coffee shop to start working, which I need to pay for data out of my own pocket. It's ridiculous. Every day there's some sort of interruption, whether it's water, whether nobody can live like this. Some old people saying there needs to be an oxygen. Where do they get it from if they don't have any power? It's really ridiculous.
Sinyangile, sidiniwe, basitshela izinto eziningi. Asikwazi ukusebenza ngoba ugesi awukho. Amafoni acishile, asikwazi ama-phone call, ama-laptop acishile, asikwazi kwenza lutho nje, asikwazi ukupheka, asikwazi ukugeza. I'm really upset because I moved into this area 10 days ago. 10 days. And within 10 days, there have been 2 cable thefts. It doesn't make sense to me. How am I supposed to work with my kids? How am I supposed to work? How am I supposed to do anything? It's been the most unproductive 10 days of my life. And it's my birthday on top of that. Really. Like, is that the gift we are getting? We pay our rates, we pay our taxes, and this is what we get.
In this place, because when it's like this, we cannot continue paying so much money, but we are not getting a good service from our municipalities. Cable now and then, even little by card, but Stone Richel every day. That's the number of officer making. Doing absolutely nothing to kind of like cap this issue because of, there's not even security that patrols around here that comes from city of Tshwane. They only comes and give us excuses all the time.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, those are just snippets of the kind of experience that South Africans have across the country. Many of us have all been experiencing the challenge of cable and metal theft. And so in that sense, the challenge is well understood. But what the presentation today will do is to try to summarize what we know about the challenge, as well as the measures that we're going to address to deal with it. A copy of the presentation has been circulated to honourable members. I'm going to ask Tsulu again just to flight the presentation, and then we would now go through the presentation. So I'd start, honourable members, by recognizing the challenge, and we'll go to the next slide. The content slide really just summarizes what the presentation will do. South Africa faces a serious challenge from theft of metal and the impairment and destruction of infrastructure that goes with that theft. The theft of scrap metal, particularly copper cable, imposes costs on the society far beyond the actual value of the material taken. And the cost, mainly in the form of disruptions to rail transport and electricity, effectively cuts production, it inhibits economic growth, and it impacts badly on service delivery. Here's just a few media reports of an enormous number explaining the problem, highlighting difficulties. Honourable members will see articles from Reuters, from Daily Maverick, and from broadband.co.za. The next slide really looks at the cost of metal theft, and it identifies costs that we as society pay: economic costs, costs in rail and energy, physical danger to South Africans, environmental damage and costs, disruption of essential services, job losses, and of course the enormous indirect costs. For example, if we just take the the area of environmental costs arising from the need to replace damaged infrastructure and all of that cost that is added to the society, or the retardation of economic growth and job creation that limits the opportunities for businesses to be competitive and to employ more people, or the interruption of the supply of energy in hospitals, in schools, and in our daily lives, in our homes, in our workplaces. These are all costs associated with metal theft. The next slide indicates the approach of government. In February this year, President Ramaphosa, in the State of the Nation address, noted that the damage caused by the theft of scrap metal and cable in our infrastructure, like electricity, trains, and other vital services, is enormous. The President said we will take decisive steps this year, both through improved law enforcement and by considering further measures to address the sale or export of such scrap metal. That was in February this year. Immediately thereafter, the department undertook a range of work that we'll be reporting on, and thereafter reported the outcome of all the work done with other government departments. And in June this year, Cabinet considered the matter and released a statement at the end of its meeting, calling for public consultation to be undertaken on proposals to restrict the trade of illegally obtained scrap and processed metals. The Cabinet statement dealt with the damage. It indicated that the theft of scrap metal and copper cable from public infrastructure hinders the performance of the economy by imposing enormous costs. Some of the disruptions include the supply of energy and rail services. They impose additional transport costs on commuters due to disrupted commuter transport. Vandalized and unsecured electricity cables pose safety risks to communities, particularly children. Cabinet directed that the DTIC should lead consultations within a limited period and solicit inputs from the public and relevant sectors on effective measures that government can implement to stop the vandalizing of critical economic infrastructure. Thereafter, Cabinet will pronounce on the approved measures. The next slide really characterizes the work that we've done. To track the extent of the problem that we face and to identify potential solutions, government commissioned research from independent experts, including trade and industrial policy strategies and Genesis Analytics. We also secured inputs from Eskom, Transnet, the South African Police Service, and the business community. Our approach is to have a balanced approach, having regard to the need to combat the challenge of metal theft in a proportionate manner. And we seek to propose various measures and to adopt them after consideration of the public input, with such adjustments as are necessary based on the public input. And what these measures seek to do is that they will create a new metal trading regime in the country. That this metal trading regime is intended and it's designed to undermine the criminal syndicates and the networks that threaten South Africa's vital economic infrastructure, while at the same time limiting the extent to which the new arrangements impose costs on the metal value chain. So it's finding that balance, but at the same time ensuring that our actions are effective. The next slide. The next slide that we have in the documentation, and we've lost the connection. I'm going to ask that the connection be brought back on, really looks at the cost of metal theft, and it draws on the work that was done by Genesis Analytics. They considered just aspects of the challenge that we face, and just taking a few key areas where costs were imposed, they calculated that the annual costs based on those few areas exceeded 46 billion rand. And Those costs were drawn from work done with Transnet, with the mining industry, with PRASA, and they don't include all the other costs that we would normally need to add to this. So to give an indication of this, just there from Transnet alone, with security, metal replacement, repairs that are required, and lost revenue, amounts to something of the order of 4.6 billion rand. When we add to that the disruption caused to the mining industry, because they're not able to move their minerals as a result of damage and theft on infrastructure, that has been costed at a further 30 billion rand by the Minerals Council. Looking just at PRASA, separate from Transnet, the metal replacement and repairs is 1.6 billion rand, and the slide indicates the other costs. So just these areas alone are 7 billion rand from electricity networks of Eskom and municipalities, 7 billion rand. What we've not added in are the theft from other businesses and associated costs, the costs faced by businesses across the economy outside of the mining sector due to stoppages and delayed inputs, the increased road maintenance. There's a range of other costs that are incurred. And in the footnote, honorable members will also see that we haven't factored in the costs with decreased business confidence and the associated costs from the loss of South Africa's rail cost advantage in the movement of goods across the country. So whichever way we deal with it, the theft of metal and copper cable from our public infrastructure is enormously damaging to our economy. The next slide will provide a bit of information on specific areas. It drills down a little bit. In the case of Transnet, for example, it indicates the damage there. South Africa has about 25,000 kilometers of railway lines, and some of it is owned by PRASA, and Transnet operates the remainder. The length of cable stolen from Transnet's lines rose sixfold from 2017 to 2021. The amount of cable stolen from Transnet climbed from 120 kilometers to 724 kilometers over that period. Just in 2021 alone, more than 200 kilometers of railway track was reported stolen in November of that year. And in August, Transnet had reported an impact of 4.1 billion rand due to cable theft. In the case of Eskom, we've had large-scale theft of copper cable used for electricity transmission and distribution. In the financial year 2020, ending in March 2021, the damage from stolen steel lattices was estimated at 100 million rand. And Eskom's network comprises something of the order of 33,000 kilometers of transmission lines and 391,000 kilometers of distribution lines. So we're talking there of more than 400,000 kilometers of network. And that's network of copper, aluminium, and of steel. Aside from the economic damage, there's also lives that are affected and livelihoods. There have been reported deaths due to tampering with electrical infrastructure, risk to safety of communities, workers not able to make it to work due to transport and infrastructure disruption. In 2019, it was reported that passengers took a total of 175 million personal rail journeys and paid 2.4 billion rand. 2 years later, we would expect this to be increasing. We see a significant decrease. An example of that is in Cape Town with the PRASA lines. We've also highlighted here some examples from Joburg City Power to show that it affects not only the national network companies like Transnet and Eskom, but also municipalities that bring this together. And honorable members will see their reported figures that 285 theft cases were reported between August 2020 and April 2021 in Joburg alone. And that I'm advised that infrastructure theft resulted in an estimated loss for Joburg of 36 million rand. And about 85 million rand is spent annually on additional security personnel and security infrastructure to deal with this. Now, this is replicated across the country. It's not just one municipality, a big metro like Joburg. It's all the metros have experienced challenges. It's not only the metros, it's municipalities across the country that's affected by this. The next slide is a detailed slide. It maps out the value chain of scrap, and it looks at really the integrated way in which the value chain realizes opportunities legitimately for businesses and illegitimately for the crime syndicates that use these to be able to monetize their access to scrap metal, to stolen scrap metal. And what this shows is, in the orange block, honorable members will see the iron ore value chain, which is not the subject of the measures that we're contemplating. And then in the green one, the scrap one. And they range from formal sources to informal sources. So the formal sources would be, in many cases, legitimate businesses. The informal sources would be, in some cases, also legitimate businesses. But in both instances, formal and informal, there are challenges with damage to public infrastructure as people seek to secure access to more scrap metal and to copper cable. And from these sources, they can either go to metal aggregators or metal recyclers. They can be exported from the aggregators. They can be exported from the metal recyclers. They could move from there to steel mills, to mini mills, or to foundries, and they can export the country at any of these points. So what it shows is that there are multiple exit points where scrap metal or stolen metal, copper cable, or stolen or legitimately secured can exit and be monetized through either a domestic system within the domestic value chains or through exports. The next slide will then move to the fundamental challenge that drives so much of metal and copper theft, and that is high demand and high prices. The widespread spread theft of infrastructure is driven by high demand for copper scrap and other forms of metal, particularly for the export market. We sell a lot to other countries, and because their industries can't be supplied only with the scrap that's generated in those economies, there's a significant export market. A multi-billion rand industry has flourished. Legally collected scrap metal and scrap stolen from public and private infrastructure are sold to recycling firms who supply both the domestic industry, such as foundries and steel mini mills, and export markets. There was a sharp rise in global demand and prices in 2021, going through to 2022, and the theft of scrap metal intensified. The next slide looks at a challenge that we've addressed in the past, and that's the challenge of shortage of supply in the domestic market. This is not related to the rest of the measures we're contemplating here, but we thought it's helpful by way of just background information to provide the committee with information on the slide. So a number of years ago, to address challenges where the export of scrap metal impacted on other public policy goals like local industrialization, climate change goals, and the need of the country's infrastructure program, we introduced various measures. In 2013, government introduced a price preference system to restrict the export of scrap metal without first offering it to local industry at concessional pricing. In 2020, a temporary prohibition on exports was introduced during COVID to address a shortage of scrap metal in the domestic market. And in 2021, an export tax was put in place. These measures have been broadly successful in addressing the industrial policy goals. The new proposals, therefore, do not really seek to address these areas. They focus instead on the theft of metal and copper cable. So the next slide then takes us to the second challenge, which is addressing the theft of metal and copper cable, particularly from infrastructure. From 2016, a number of steps have been taken to address the theft of metal and copper cable. Looking at sentencing and bail as an example, legislative measures were introduced in 2016 through the Criminal Matters Amendment Act of 2015 that provides for a range of things. Particularly a new category of offense was put on our statute books, and that category of offense was damage to essential infrastructure. So that was lifted out and made a separate and specific offense. Sentencing was increased to up to 30 years, or in the case of a business that was affected, a fine of up to 100 million rand per incident. Bail conditions were made stricter for such offences. So that was on sentencing and bail. Turning to security and policing, in 2016, the South African Police Service issued a national instruction note to facilitate policing of the scrap metal trade. In 2017, there was the use of regulations under the Second-Hand Goods Act to empower other agencies to act as law enforcement officers. For example, I recall that in that year, the city of Cape Town was given, their officers were given these law enforcement powers. In 2022, Transnet security officers were granted powers under the Criminal Procedures Act as peace officers to make arrests and assist the NPA with prosecutions. The next number of slides will look in more detail at what has been done and some of the challenges. Slide 15, for example, deals with actions by SAPS on the establishment of an economic infrastructure task team with dedicated officials and measures that require the registration under the Second-Hand Goods Act, and stepped up investigations and raids, which I will talk about more in a moment. The South African Revenue Service took a number of steps, and some steps are also being contemplated. These included the cancelling of illegal operators' customs codes. Serious non-compliance is being pursued with criminal charges, and where elements of non-compliance is detected, significant penalties are being proposed to be imposed. Within the different public entities and also Telkom, a range of measures have been taken. Eskom, for example, have improved their fencing, CCTV cameras, electronic access controls, alarm systems, security lighting, patrolling and traffic control, and they've used drones to be able to survey the areas under their control. And in a number of cases, 20 specialized tactical response officers have been put per station. In some cases, we have 24/7 specialized security systems and technology with dedicated protection of generation plants to ensure that we protect our various power stations. Transnet has been using drones and increased patrols. Just to illustrate, for example, for the coal line from Mpumalanga to Richards Bay, they have to cover 750 kilometers, making additional security measures difficult to implement. In the case of PRASA, we've been advised that they have a number of new security officials for identified hotspots, 3,100 such officials. They're building concrete walls along some lines, and they have technology control rooms. In the case of Telkom, they've reported more than 1.5 billion rand spent on theft prevention and costs incurred in other measures over a 5-year period. Telkom recently advised us that they've had 470 kilometers of copper wires replaced in just 2 years because of the challenges that they face. They are putting in place alarms on critical and sensitive routes, and they're employing private armed security firms. They're looking at aerial cable routes to be buried underground, and they're deploying wireless technologies as an alternative to copper. So we're absorbing an enormous costs to these public entities that they have to then pass on to ordinary South Africans through increased costs in rail transport, in electricity pricing, in telephony costs because of the theft here. The next few slides show a number of media reports. They're just a small sample of a much larger number of media reports. Here is one of the 8th of July 2022 from SABC News showing that police raided the SA Metal scrapyard in Ilansfontein, and where I advised arrested the owners, and copper estimated in the millions was seized. The next slide shows a Fidelity Services Group tweet, I think this is, during a routine patrol. They say their team in the Vaal came across a man taking steel from the local railway. The team apprehended the man for theft of Transnet infrastructure, and he was handed over to other security company responsible for the site. The next one will show a Cape Talk a tweet saying effectively that metal theft remains a huge problem, and Transnet will be spending 4 billion rand on security, and they quote Group CEO of Transnet. The next slide shows an example from Sunday World of a scrapyard manager in jail for possession of copper cable. The next slide indicates from News 24 that 2 men were arrested after allegedly being found with stolen copper cables worth 3 million rand. And you see a picture there of the 2 in handcuffs. The next slide shows also a News 24 story with an Eastern Cape scrapyard dealer caught in alleged possession of 120 kilograms of illegal copper. The next slide is from the Sunday Times, and it reports that Gauteng police seized 10 million rand in stolen copper and arrests 4 people.